Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Derek Lambert. I'm a coordinator at the West Virginia Department of Education, and I will be serving as the moderator for this session. You are currently in the Supports for Homeless Students session scheduled for today from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. To ask the presenter a question during this session, you can type your question into the Q&A section to the right of your screen. Please note the words event and session to the right. To ask questions within the session, click on Session, then select Q&A. It will give you a prompt to ask a question, and I will be directing Becky to those questions as we go along. So, Becky, if you're ready, you can take it away.
Take it away. Good afternoon. I know we've had a long day. I'll try to not make it much longer in terms of being too wordy and too boring, and I might throw a couple stories in because I'm known to do that. I have been McKinney-Vento Homeless Coordinator here at the department since 2009. It is a passion of mine. I think when you work with these programs, it has to become a passion in order for you to thrive and for the program to thrive. I'm supposed to talk about how McKinney-Vento students access higher education, and I want to do that. And I have a couple documents that you have access to. The government puts out through the National Council of Homeless Education some wonderful briefs, and what they do is they take policy and guidance and they put it in layman's terms. And on your access point for this presentation, you have best practices in homeless education along with PowerPoint, and it's called Increasing Access to Higher Education for Unaccompanied Youth, Information for Colleges and Universities. I get a lot of calls, especially in the spring, about homeless students who have managed to graduate from high school and what the next steps are. And this brief explains opportunities which aren't always explained at the school level for homeless kids to access career tech and higher education colleges. And it's a great opportunity for me to share this with you. Transitioning from high school to career tech or higher ed is very difficult for kids who have no support. And it's important that we understand the agencies that provide these supports and how to make sure that they are identified as homeless and the opportunities that brings. If you look at the slide, and again, this PowerPoint's available, I call it the McKinney-Vento training PowerPoint. You could actually get this PowerPoint and train people in your agency or, at schools or wherever. It's self-explanatory, and it's a lot of information that people really don't know. We have a lot of homeless in this country right now. We have them on the street most everywhere you go. I live in Charleston, so it's busting at the seams with homeless people. And, everybody equates homelessness sometimes to the law and order homeless. When we're talking about school children, we're talking about a little different level of homelessness. Yes, they may be on the street, but we're talking about children. And most of the people you see that are actually living on the streets are grown adults and oftentimes vagrants. On this first slide here, you see this family. We have Sojourners, which is the shelter. This is a family shelter here in Charleston. We actually provide a grant to this shelter because now it will have children, and these children are required to attend public school. They have wings in this shelter for families, for single females, And I go in there periodically and visit the classroom that we provide. When the individuals uh, enter the shelter, the kids enroll in school immediately, and we have a classroom set up to where they can go and do their homework. And I think one of the saddest, and perhaps I'm glad it exists, is to go in and see new babies. They have family rooms that allow parents and new babies. Sometimes a woman will have a baby at the hospital and have nowhere to go. So the opportunity to have this shelter is, it's wonderful, and it meets the need that many communities don't have. We get lots of money to support homeless children in West Virginia. We get federal money through McKinney-Vento, which is the name of the law. It was two senators who proposed this bill to support homeless families in 1980s. And this year we were lucky enough to get $620,617. And we do competitive grants with counties and school systems who provide services, extra services, much of which are in the shelters like the one I showed you on the first slide, and make sure that the kids are enrolled. That's, again, a federal law, immediate enrollment. And then Title I has been around for 30 years, if not longer, and it's for low-income schools with a high poverty rate. And part of Title I is a Title I set-aside. If you don't get a grant, you have to put money in your Title I budget for homeless families and children. And that can really include a lot of items that people don't realize that are available for the children, and I'm going to explain those as well. Each LEA, and an LEA in educational terms is a school system, receive Title I funds, which are federal funds, and they have to put enough money in their homeless set aside to provide a list of things such as a week of clothing, shoes, glasses, and I'll go into that in more detail in a little bit. All right, here are the allowable uses for Title I funds. And I think this will really surprise you. Provide academic support as well as non-academic support. In other words, we can do tutoring specifically for homeless children who are identified, activities that promote student achievement. Like we made sure this summer that homeless children were included in the summer school programs. I get calls at the end of the school year again about caps and gowns. We can pay for caps and gowns out of that Title I set aside, pay for ACT, SAT testing, and again, a week's clothing, supplies, personal hygiene supplies. And the reason we do a week is because many times they don't have access to a washer and dryer, and they may go to the laundromat on the weekends, and so they have enough clothes to get through the week. Support a homeless liaison. In West Virginia, the code, West Virginia school law, designates the attendance director as the homeless liaison. Well, in bigger counties, that can really get time consuming. And so with this money, we can hire a homeless liaison position. We can hire special teachers, aides, and tutors. We can reach out to parents and support them. And we're currently going to be able to do that in a much more extensive service. We received $5 million, and we're going to be able to pay emergency situations such as rent, utilities. We're working on how to get that out to counties right now, but it's something to look forward to in the coming weeks. Again, before school, after school, and summer programs. Most homeless children are 2 to 3, if not more, years behind in school. And then the collection of the data is very, very important. It gets us more money from the federal government. The more that we can report on the good things that are happening with our children and the services that we're providing them, the more money that we can perhaps receive to serve them. All right. Again, counties have this set aside and it's determined by need. In other words, if a county spent $40,000 last year on the set aside, and they spent it, they'd need $40,000 again in the set aside. And it's reviewed by a team of people here that work in Title I and make sure that there's no zeros. We can't have zeros. McKinney-Vento Homeless. This is a big, big one I want you to really write down and think about. This is how we identify homeless children. Again, it's very different than how adult homeless people are identified. First of all, children in a shelter and transitional housing. Shelter children may include foster kids waiting on placement, but foster kids for the most are not considered homeless identified. Doubled up. Doubled up means living with another family or some other people who are not your immediate family. And people will say, oh, it's not so bad being doubled up living with another family. Well, I had a woman in DC who's a wonderful policy writer and worked for National Council of Homeless Education for years, explain how doubled up is in reality. And if you're sleeping on the floor in a living room and people are robbing from you, using you for to gain sexual favors and using your children, you're barely eating. Doubled up is not the panacea that some people think it is. Unsheltered, we're getting more people in cars, parks, campgrounds, temporary trailer or abandoned buildings. This is true again of adults, but if they have children, there's some wonderful videos. If you type, go into YouTube and do homeless children videos, and they talk about what it's like to try to go to school and live in a car. I can't imagine. I know we all have probably experienced that one payday from being out on the streets in our lifetimes, but to actually live in a car and try to go to school and maintain is just unimaginable to me. People who live in hotels and motels, and I've had people say, well, who wouldn't like to live in a hotel or a motel? Well, I sure wouldn't, especially some of the hotels and motels that they live in here in Charleston. We call them flop houses. There's a lot of drugs, a lot of prostitution. I don't want children raised in that kind of environment. I'm sure nobody else really that understands it would either. Now, here's what we're talking about with higher ed, the unaccompanied youth. I've had principals question children, why did you leave home? Why don't you go back home? You don't need to be here. I'm not going to enroll you in my school. We don't know what kind of circumstances when a student goes from county to county. The people that couch surf, the people that go in and live with their friends or go live with their girlfriends. And we think they maybe do it by choice. Well, maybe they do. But oftentimes people who are abused or used, which are the same thing, don't share with others. They're embarrassed. They don't want to say, well, my mother's boyfriend would come and get in bed with me, or I would watch them do drugs, or they would beat me. And so there are underlying circumstances oftentimes with these unaccompanied youth. So please be patient when you talk to people about unaccompanied youth, and they are the least supported when, say, they manage to graduate. What do they do next? Where do they go? Well, they can't go back home. Do they go to the streets? Well, oftentimes they do go to the streets. And that's where we need to work with higher ed and transition these children, and they're still children, 17, 18-year-olds, into housing. All right.
Sorry to interrupt, but we did have a question. I just wanted to wait till you completed a thought. Patty Blake asked if Sojourners is available to anyone in West Virginia who is homeless.
Yes, it is. They have certain requirements, but yes, it is available. They only allow you to bring in. It's really interesting, and I wish people would visit Sojourners. You check in. You're allowed to bring one bag of possessions, and if it's clothing, they launder it before they check you into your room. They had a really bad bed bug infestation there several years ago, so they're very careful about letting people in, and it's very clean and it's very COVID safe now. But yes, it's available to anybody in West Virginia. The Charleston homeless population has expanded partly because of the services that Charleston provides. I have been told that if you're a homeless individual living on the streets in Charleston, that you can obtain 64 meals in the course of a week. And I don't know if you all remember Danny Jones. He was our mayor one mayor ago, and he would, if one of the vagrants who were homeless would commit a crime, he would give them a bus ticket to go back home, because they came here because the services that Charleston provides are really good. All right. Again, sheltered children attend public schools without any delay. Another thing is the free and reduced lunch. Lunch is expensive. Many of our children, and you all may have heard Bonnie Dunn talk a little bit about healthy grandfamilies. Many of our children are living with grandparents, and that's doubled up. And it would be unaccompanied youth. Say mom went to jail or just left the child with grandma. It would be either one, and actually coded as both. Bonnie Dunn does a tremendous service for these grandparents with healthy grandfamilies, in as much as the lessons, there's 10 modules when counties and schools participate in her program that teach you how to navigate the school system, how to navigate DHHR and make sure the child has a medical card. There's a lot to taking on little kids when you're a 70 and 80-year-old grandparent. You don't have oftentimes computer skills. There's a session on how to do that. I think West Virginia is up to the most in the nation with grandparents who have grandchildren. And I mean, there are instances where there's an 80-year-old woman taking care of one elementary and one pre-K child. I can't imagine that. And they need all the help they can get. And they are entitled to all that I read, the allowable expenses. But you've just got to get the word out there that people understand that they are entitled to all these services and all these, supplies. And then counties are not always welcoming to our little homeless child that shows up at the front door. We'd like to think that they are, and we train and train and train, trying to make sure they are. But, I always say you can't give that caring to people that don't have it. And so we have to make sure that they are removed from these children coming in and out so that the kids their education isn't hindered because of people who don't care. Transportation of homeless students. This is a biggie with foster kids and homeless kids. First of all, homeless kids, again, are so far behind. They're 2 and 3 grade levels behind. So research has proven that if they can stay in the school that they attended last prior to becoming homeless, that they have a better chance to, do better in school, make better grades, interact with their peers who they've been with perhaps for a year or 2 or more. And so we try not to remove kids. And sometimes it's possible and sometimes it's not. It depends upon if you have a family who becomes homeless and moves to an adjoining county, how can you connect buses to where that child can go back to the school that they attended prior to becoming homeless? Again, people don't always know that, and they don't always take advantage of that service. Here's priority areas. With this new money, we're going to provide some additional services that came through the federal government this summer. Hopefully, now most of these are like extracurricular fees. Say we have a homeless child who wants to play in the band. We can lease them an instrument. They need a band uniform. We can get them a band uniform. We can do many things that we haven't been able to do for homeless kids with the availability of this new money. And there will be more information coming out on that in the near future. We're still working on the dispersal of that money, how we're going to do it, but it's coming down the pike. Transportation, again, it's the right, but the guardian or the parent has to understand that they have this right. And if the school doesn't tell them, many times they don't find out. Foster care used to be part of McKinney-Vento. We counted foster children in our count. They are no longer counted. We've got about 7,000 foster kids in the state right now. And before COVID, we had 10,584 homeless identified students, and we should have had many more. We're under-identified probably about 3 to 4%, and that's based on nationwide totals. Homeless children witness more violence and are more likely to exhibit frequent aggressive and antisocial behavior, increased fearfulness, higher levels of depression and anxiety, and have a greater acceptance of violence as a means of resolving conflict. And here, this second paragraph talks about 36% repeated grade, 21% repeated grade because of frequent absence from school, 14% repeated grade because they've moved to a new school. Right there is a reason to keep them in school of origin. And 40% of homeless children attend 2 different schools, and 28% attend 3 or more different schools. This is I always loved this picture. It truly is what homelessness looks like, all ages. I want to talk to you now, and I don't have a PowerPoint on this, but I'm going to talk to you about the unaccompanied youth and what we can do for them in terms of higher education. Does anybody have any more questions? First, I want to read you a profile of an unaccompanied homeless youth. Carl's situation is typical of many unaccompanied homeless youth. His father died when he was a baby due to abuse by his mother's boyfriend. Carl left home during the senior year in high school and stayed with a variety of family members and friends, most of whom lived outside of his school district. Fearing he would be kicked out of school while doubling up outside his school's residential zone, Carl hid his living situation from school officials. After graduating high school, which was a huge feat, believe me, for Carl decided to work for a year to save money for college. Although his living situation was still unstable, he at least felt like he had enough money to look into enrolling in college. While filling out his FAFSA, Carl noticed multiple places in the application requesting parent signatures or information about parental income and financial contributions. He was relieved to notice the application mentioned the term independent student, and it appears that he meets the necessary criteria, but he doesn't know who can determine his independent student status for the purpose of the FAFSA. When he mentioned the issue to the financial aid staff at the local community college, they seemed hesitant to qualify him as an independent student and told him he must submit his mother's financial records. He has only a sporadic contact with his mother since leaving home 2 years ago, and any attempts at communication have met with indifference and hostility. Carl is about to give up his dream to go to college. Well, all Carl had to do was go back to the high school from which he graduated, and from the attendance director in that county or the high school principal, get a letter stating that he was homeless, unaccompanied youth, for the 2 years before his graduation. That letter in itself, presented to the financial aid office, would be enough for Carl to get into college. Now, I get calls periodically about these transitioning unaccompanied youth, and we've just got to get the word out there that it just takes a letter. The National Council of Homeless Education, write that down and visit that website. Not only does it have briefs like this one that I have for your information attached to this presentation, but it probably has 150 different topics: special ed and homelessness, immediate enrollment in homelessness, transportation and homelessness, and it answers all the questions, and it's a wonderful website. It also has a template letter for a principal or attendance director to fill out for these young people trying to go on and make something of their lives. The barriers for these children are people that don't understand what's available for them and who they are. And we're going to make an attempt in the coming months to train a lot more people. And it has to get down. We have to train not only our teachers and our principals, but we have to train bus drivers. We have to train cooks. we have to train anybody, secretaries in the school, we have to train anybody who comes in contact with these students. Do y'all have any questions? I like to tell stories, and I'm going to tell you, when I was 4, we went to live with my grandmother. I would have qualified for homeless as a child myself. We kind of moved around from pillar to post. I have a great deal of respect for people who manage to survive homelessness and make something of their lives, because it's not easy. I was also part of a dysfunctional family. My mother was bipolar, and my father died in the Huntington City mission when he was 54 years old. So as you can see, I hope that everybody who is a part of hearing this, kind of takes the extra step, shares the information with colleagues, and gets really interested in what we can do for our homeless students.
Hey, Becky, sorry to interrupt again. Dawn asked, what website was that again? And I'm not sure. It was just about 2 minutes ago, so I'm assuming it was about the financial aid. I'm not sure. I was watching the Q&A, so I'm not sure at what point he asked that question.
It was the National Council of Homeless Education, NCHE, and it has a lot of legislative information. It has the briefs that explain, higher ed and how to identify.
Okay.
NCHE. All you'd have to do is just Google NCHE. Unaccompanied homeless youth often do not have guidance and support of caring adults as they prepare for college and navigate the system. Even if they're able to enroll, they have difficulty providing for their basic needs, which impacts their ability to be successful in the classroom. Supporting these youth in obtaining a college education will enable them to break the cycle of poverty and move toward a brighter and more stable future. Institutions of higher learning, in conjunction and collaboration with public schools and community agencies, can play a critical role in supporting unaccompanied youth in their post-secondary education. I also work with HUD. Lauren Frederick is in the Clarksburg unit of HUD, and they got $1 million to do some transitional housing for unaccompanied youth or foster children who, foster children too, they come out of foster care, and unless they have managed to be in a position to do a plan prior to graduation, they don't really have anywhere to go after they graduate. So with foster children, there's a modified program that uses 4E for 4E funds for transitional housing, but you've got to sign up, and that's something that people don't understand about foster care. Foster and homeless, they can be interchangeable oftentimes, because we have foster children who, again, come out of care and they become homeless because they have nowhere to go. So you might also look at what's available for some of the kids that you may know who want to go on to college, and look at some of the agencies like HUD who are getting into, and there's another agency in Wayne County, Stepping Stone. Stepping Stone has taken a lot of the foster kids and that are coming out, aging out, and they are actually building tiny houses. If you haven't looked at any of that, that's really interesting. They're doing it in conjunction with Career Tech and Wayne County High School, and they've got a couple already ready, and they're going to have them in kind of a community where foster kids will live in those tiny houses until they go on to college. I know there's other counties that are doing similar things with transitioning youth. I know that oftentimes they aren't allowed in shelters. Single males have a problem getting into shelters as homeless men. Families and children have much better. And oftentimes, the children have to be smaller. I think there's an age limit for some shelters, and families won't go into a shelter if they can't take all the kids with them. And so that's something that people need to be aware of. We have Mingo County in February, we flooded. We had a student and his mother lose everything they had and was bouncing from home to home. We used this program. Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. Again, when a county has a flood or has a fire and it wipes out a house, this money can be used to buy them clothes, buy everything that we talked about earlier in the PowerPoint. And again, with this new money that's coming, we're going to be able to fund quickly. Say somebody they're going to turn their power off. We're going to be able to pay power bills. We're going to be able to pay rent on a not everybody, but to keep a homeless child in school. Say they're a couple months behind in their rent, we're going to be able to do that. The homeless McKinney-Vento law has always had an emergency clause in it, but we really haven't ever had the money. This is part of that $800 million relief package that Senator Manchin helped get for the country, Lisa Murkowski for Alaska. And that money is going to make a huge difference, especially when people are in such dire straits right now. I tell you, I don't really have a lot more to say unless there's some questions or some things that you all would like to add about homeless personal experience, or I love to hear stories. And right now, if you look at the news, our cities are drowning with homeless camps and people. And the more that we can do to save these children, make sure that they get an education, the better off we'll all be, and they will be too. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add?
Becky, I don't see any questions.
Okay, well, you've got 20 minutes till the next session.
All right. Thanks, Becky. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you, guys.